Let me see here. Did it not go live? Am I just talking into the void? Is this really? Oh my gosh. That's gonna be crazy if I just. Oh no, okay. I was like, I went and checked the stream, and I was like, oh no, it's just still showing the preview screen. Oh no, it literally just went live. What on earth? Oh my goodness, what? Just talking into the void here. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna mute the. Wow. Oh my goodness, that's insane. I've been sitting here talking for 20 minutes, and I thought I hit go live, and I guess it didn't actually go live until I just. That's insane. Oh my goodness. That's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, guys. Well, we're starting over here. I guess. Did it kill it again? What's happening here? No. Okay, we're going. We're live. Okay. Wow. This is so strange. Okay. Well. Hey guys. I've just been talking into the void for 20 minutes thinking that my stream was live. I hit go live and now it's wow, that's wild. I'm very upset at myself. Wow, I was going off, man. I had some. Now I gotta reawaken whatever was just happening in there. Oh, I'm so upset. Oh, that's so crazy. What on earth? What happened? I hit go live, but I guess I had to poke it and prod it and refresh it again for it to actually do what I needed it to do. That's insane. I'm so upset. Well, welcome, anybody. You're here. Yeah. Okay. Well, I assumed you would have at least chatted. And I was like, oh, nobody's chatting. That's fine. I'll just keep talking into the void. It's okay. And then I was like, oh, let me go check the stream and make sure it's actually live. And it was still just showing the preview. Oh my goodness. Wow. I just don't even know what to say about myself now. Okay. Let me rewind everything in my head. Welcome everyone to another thrilling stream. I appreciate anybody who happens to stop by, especially you, Ian. Menards closes early on Sundays. Save big money at Menards. Dude, I'm so upset. I was going. I had a good thing going, and it wasn't live. I hit go live, and I just had to refresh the page for it to actually agree that I had gone live. So that's frustrating. Okay, let me let me back up again. So I had prepared this sort of brief explanation that I'll redo now, which is one of the reasons I love teaching the American founders, and it's because they're not as impressive as other thinkers, and that sounds like an insult at first, but let me explain. If you read the writings of the founders, if you read Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, you read their letters, you read their books, etc., what you'll find, I think, are really interesting thinkers, really well trained in the history of political thought, really well researched in different systems of government across the world, really conversant in classical works and then classic works, so quoting liberally from the ancient Greeks and Plutarch's lives and Shakespeare alike. We'll see that with Adams today. But they're not the same thing as like sort of the great thinkers of history. You will not find in the American founding thinkers on level with people like Plato and Aristotle, or even like Hume and Kant and Rousseau. That's not to say they're not smart. They are. That's not to say that they're not worth reading. They are. They're just doing something different. And they're doing something different in a way that makes them, I think, particularly interesting for us. And that's because they are not quite so far from us as some of those quote-unquote great thinkers of history. The situation that gives rise to the American founding, the situation that gives them their education, the situation that creates the American experiment, is not so far removed from any of us that it's not understandable. Now, in many ways, they did have a better education and contact with history than we do, and that's lamentable. But these are not sort of the intellectual giants of all of human history sitting on mountaintops talking to each other. They are speaking to an applied political situation. They are founders. I really, really love teaching Machiavelli, even though I have strong disagreements with Machiavelli. If you like Machiavelli too much, I start getting a little worried for you. Those sorts of things. I love teaching Machiavelli because he has some, I think, stirring insights. And one of his insights is on the nature of founders, great founders in history who managed to accomplish founding a new state or a new city. And he says what makes those founders unique is that they are able to combine two things. One of these is virtue, or virtù in Italian, that sometimes people leave untranslated because Machiavelli's idea of virtue is very different than what comes to our minds when we use that word virtue. But what he means by virtue appears to be something like prowess and skill, manly prowess, some people translate it as, right? So good founders have a skillfulness. They are just good at what they do. They are effective leaders. They have all the traits that make leaders successful. But good founders also are presented with the material that they need to actually accomplish a founding. And so the analogy I like to use for this is Aristotelian hylomorphism. And this is why I'm mad I'm having to go back and redo this rant, because I thought I nailed it the first time through, but now you guys are getting the second run through and I'll probably make mistakes. But if you go read Plato and Aristotle side by side, you will find, at least on a surface level, they have a strong disagreement about this thing we call the forms or essences. You might know, if you've read Plato, that it seems that Plato believes in a, okay, let's see. Wick is hosting another court packing debate with me and Pisco versus two conservatives on Tuesday. Be sure to tune in, and you can pop in during the open panel afterwards. I might just do that. One of these days, Wick will ask me to be the token conservative on that panel, and then I can yell at you for the whole panel and not just during the open. So Plato has this idea of forms, these, you purchased H.W. Brand's new biography of President Washington. Let's go. That looks really good. I have not picked it up. I've not read a lot of biographies actually of founders. I'm working on that. So there's a 2-volume biography of Adams that was published in the, I think 60s, 70s, that I'm working through slowly, that I'm really enjoying. So it's not the David McCulloch one. It's the earlier one, who's the, let me see, John Adams, 2-volume biography. Who wrote this? This is, Page Smith, 1963. It's about 1,200 pages altogether. So I'm working my way through the first volume of that. I really, really need to get more biographies of the founders. There's a lot of really interesting ones out there. So let me know how that is when you get to it, and I might add it to my list. I just finished a short one on Franklin by Gordon Wood called The Americanization of Benjamin Franklin, basically the process by which Franklin became an American icon in his own time and ours. 1776, Otto von Bismarck, Alexis Cole's Washington biography, Never Forget Your First. There you go. It'll be your fourth. Amazing. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about McCulloch, but I don't think I've ever read any of his books, so I should probably fix that at some point. I think I will read his Adams biography after I'm done with this bigger, fatter one. So I really got to shore up some of my basic historical knowledge. A lot of my teaching is mostly about the texts, right? So I'm just like, well, here's this text, and I learn basically the bare minimum I need to give students a sort of biographical introduction to the authors, but that's not really my bread and butter. What I care about is mostly the stuff that's kind of on the page. All right, I will find my train of thought. But thank you for stopping by, Josiah. I hope you're doing well. Enjoy that debate. I will have strong disagreements with you again, I'm sure, but I will be watching it and taking good notes so that maybe someday we can hop on a stream and argue it out. Yeah, so we'll fight about it. We'll fight about it. It'll be fun. So, okay, I'm going to find my train of thought again. Yes, Plato, Aristotle, hylomorphic foundings. Let's go. So Plato has this idea of forms or essences that for something to be what it is, it shares in the idea of that thing. And so a beautiful thing shares in the form of beauty, the capital B beauty that you can access with your mind's eye that's been trained to apprehend the conceptual world. These things are eternal. They're the really real things, the things outside the cave, etc. For Aristotle, this seems a little bit weird. And Aristotle's point in his discussion of the form or essence of a thing is we only really encounter the form in the thing itself. Form and matter combine to make the thing. If I break the thing, the form kind of goes away. It's not still existent in some sort of conceptual realm. Instead, if I have a cup like I have here in front of me, the idea or the essence of cupness is in the clay or the ceramic that makes up this mug that I've got in front of me. If I smash the mug, it's no longer a mug. The essence isn't just existing in this ethereal plane. I like to tell students that you should use that to think about founding in the way that Machiavelli talks about it. Machiavelli says you combine your skill, your virtue, with the material you've been given, the type of people that you have, the type of army that you have, the historical situation that you find yourself in. And a really excellent founder is the person who can combine those two things well and create a state. And that's what our founders did. And so I'm not calling them Machiavellian in the sort of colloquial sense that it means quite a bad thing. I just mean when you read Machiavelli's description of founders, it really does read well for what happens in our moment. So when I say that the founders are not the best thinkers who ever lived, it's not intended as an insult. Instead, they're something quite different, and in some ways, maybe even more admirable in ways, right? Some of the greatest thinkers of all time are some of the most practically useless human beings of all time, but our founders were statesmen. They were applied in their activity. They did politics, and they did it well, and we're still benefiting from it here, some 250 years later as we head towards the anniversary of the Declaration. I just think that's neat. All that to say, kind of ironic that I'm telling you that about think of these great statesmen when today we're going to be looking at somebody who is not a great statesman. I don't think, at least not in the presidential context. He's quite a good statesman in the founding period leading up to his presidency. His presidency is something else entirely, and that's John Adams. So we're going to be reading through a few selections from Adams, but now I'm thrown off entirely because I was ranting to dead air for 20 minutes, and so now I have to figure out how much time I actually have. So I'll probably go until about 10:30 tonight, maybe a little bit longer, just because I got started a little late because of that snafu with the go live button. That was insane. I'm still upset about it. But this is a volume, The Political Writings of John Adams, edited by George A. Peake, Jr., and I wanted to read you a section from his preface to this book. Adams wrote a lot, okay? His grandson, I believe it's Charles Adams, I might be getting that wrong, but his son is John Quincy. John Quincy's son is the one who collects the first attempt at his collected papers, and it's a 12-volume work published in the 1850s. It's enormous, and it includes hundreds and hundreds of letters. It includes full books like his defense of the state's constitutions. It includes his discourses on Davila. It includes all sorts of stuff. It's expansive. The dude wrote a lot. So if you're going to make a tiny little, this book is 200 pages, right? If you're going to make a tiny little edited volume condensing that, what are you going to choose and why? And it's really interesting, I think, to look at these editors and their justification for the selection of their texts. So here's what we have from Peake here. He says, the selections are chosen not only for their content, but also to illustrate Adams' methodology as a political theorist. And so when I hear that, I get really excited, right? Because this is why Adams and I get along very well. He's a political theorist. We think very similarly about these sorts of things. Let's see. What is his methodology as a political theorist? Like Aristotle long before him, Adams studied many constitutions and many political systems in order to get the raw material out of which to construct his own. So if you don't know, Aristotle and Aristotle's students spent many years studying the constitutions of different governments, basically around the known world, or at least mostly around the Mediterranean, and wrote, I think by other records we know it's over 100 different texts that are the constitution of such and such a place. And by that, what Aristotle and his students, who were kind of like grad student co-authors with him in this point, were meant is, here's the governing system of this place. Here's the way the government is structured. And unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, only one of those survives. We have Aristotle's Constitution of Athens that you can still go read. It's kind of a bummer because we probably know more about the Athenian constitution than about any of the other systems of government that Aristotle and his students study, but alas, most of those have been lost to time. Fun story, the text of the Constitution of Athens that we have today is largely able to be constructed because of this Indiana Jones type who worked for the British Library or the British Museum, I think the British Museum, and was in Egypt and was going through a market stall and saw a guy who was a grave robber who was selling a Greek manuscript, and being familiar and conversant with the Greek as all British men were in the 1800s, he skims the manuscript and is like, I think this is something really important, and purchases it. And then I think a few years later, there's another version that's found, but effectively through chance circumstances, a grave robber pulling a text out of a tomb, or a jar, like what happens with the Dead Sea Scrolls, we preserved one of Aristotle's works on constitutions. But what Peake is saying here is that, like Aristotle, Adams' way of doing political theory wasn't just speculative. It was, let's go through history and find evidence and examples and try to use that to tell us what sort of government is suitable for any given situation, what sort of government works in whatever situation we find ourselves. That's a really fun method. It's also the method of Machiavelli, by the way, right? That's why I keep referring to Machiavelli here. Machiavelli says in the dedicatory letter of the Prince, this letter to Lorenzo de' Medici, that the most valuable thing in his possession is knowledge of the actions of great men. And so he's going to pass on this knowledge of the actions of great men to modern princes so that they can learn from the mistakes of history and do it better, so that they can apply knowledge to politics and practice real political science. And so the Aristotelian method is in many ways, shockingly enough, a kind of Machiavellian method, and it's exactly what Adams is doing here. He says, surely he was selective in his choice of raw material and tended to ignore that which did not buttress his view, but keep in mind that he usually wrote with a purpose, namely to defend constitutional, balanced government. If he was less an objective writer than he was an advocate, the answer probably lies in his devotion to a cause, the cause of independence and the rule of law. So what Peake is pointing out here is that Adams, relatively famously, is not a great historian. And he's not, because that's not what he's doing. And I'm, again, very sympathetic to that, because I'm not a good historian and I don't feel like I need to be. That's not my job. What I want is my students to understand Adams' use of these texts. What is Adams doing with the texts that he presents us? Not, what would a stuffy classicist or historian tell me Plutarch means, but what did Adams think Plutarch was useful for in his defense of the American constitutional system? That's what I care about. So that's what gets me excited, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so we're going to be looking at some selections from Adams' thoughts on government first, but just look here at this. So again, this is just a short little 200-page volume, but if you wanted just an introduction to John Adams, I would send you this. Absolutely. There's nothing better that I'm aware of. And so we've already looked a little bit at some of his pre-revolutionary writings. A couple streams ago, we talked about his dissertation on the canon and feudal law, where Adams says basically in history of these two systems of law that served to constrain our thinking, that made us less free than we would have been otherwise. And so what we're oh my goodness, sorry, I'm distracted. So what we're what we're looking at there is the systems that kept us in ignorance. Monkish ignorance is a phrase that Jefferson liked a lot, that I'm sure Adams used at some point. Then his instructions of the town of Braintree, that's when Adams is a freeholder in the town of Braintree. They, as a town, send instructions to their representative in the Massachusetts legislature to oppose some of the acts of the English. This is the place for all the pro-AI takes. Yes, you know what? I think, actually, this 200-page book, when I opened it in Adobe, it said, this looks like a pretty long PDF document. Would you like us to give you an AI summary of it? And I said, you know what? That's exactly what I need. Why would I spend hours of my life just reading it out loud into the void on a stream? No. I can just get AI to summarize it for me, and then my job will be done. I don't even need to teach anymore. I can just give students the AI summary. There's a website that I can put that AI summary in and have it voice act it for me. It can probably deliver a better lecture than I can. I'm hitting stop streaming right now. I'm done. I quit. I don't know why I'm even doing this. Corey, thank you so much for enlightening me. You're great, Corey. I love you. Thanks for stopping by. It makes the streams more efficient, and efficiency, as we all know, is the goal. Not a goal, the goal. Efficiency is the goal. Yeah, you gotta come in and poke and prod me more. That'll get me ranting. Maybe that'll get me more viewers when I'm just angry about things. Yeah. Put the summary into AI and get the Uber summary. That's amazing. You know what would be really funny, actually, would be to take the AI summary of a text and then put it back into AI and ask it to turn it into a book and then compare. That would actually be relatively amusing to me. Oh my goodness. Okay, also, I'm going to do this for a little bit. If Ryan is still doing call-ins, I might call into Ryan Mullally's stream at some point. Just because there's something I wanted to talk to him about on the Rush stuff we read last time. So keep that in mind. We might do that. Let's see, who's he talking to right now?
I'm in the South and I've spent time in the Midwest.
Mega Max.
The country's real different, man.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we might do that here in a little bit. But okay. So these are the pre-revolutionary writings that we're moving now into his idea of the political system. And so we're going to read a selection from his defense of the or his thoughts on government, rather. Sorry. And then we're going to read at least the Constitution of Massachusetts. Why call into a bad faith actor? I like Ryan, and I don't always agree with how he handles things. But I get along with him, and so I'll let him fight things out with Pisco and all his buddies over there and their nonsense. I enjoy chatting with him. So I think there are fair criticisms of him, and that's fine. But yeah. We share an overlapping enthusiasm for this period of history, and I'm trying to seed him with my ideas so he can learn more stuff and be better at it. So that's my explanation, and you can tell him that. So we're gonna maybe get to a little bit of the defense of the Constitution of government of the United States, but we're gonna start with thoughts on government. So you're gonna see some freezing here. Boop 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 boop. No English. We are starting with his thoughts on government. And one thing that I love about this is you will see, if you just read a little bit of Adams, how conversant these people are in just a wide variety of texts. He'll be pulling from Plutarch, he'll be pulling from Shakespeare. I mean, these guys are widely read, and it's really wonderful, and it makes you feel so dumb. Right? When you sit down and read some of these things, especially when you're reading like the Federalist Papers, and you realize that these are glorified letters to the editor of a newspaper, and you realize that these guys are referring to texts that most of us can't even read anymore and certainly haven't read, and that many of them were reading them in the original languages, or maybe in Latin and translation in some cases, but quite often reading them in both Greek and Latin. It's crazy. It's crazy. Who am I talking about? I was talking about Ryan. Yeah, Corey was asking why I might call into Ryan's show, and I don't necessarily tactically agree with the angle that Ryan took in that last debate. I think he should have just either gotten Pisco to agree to a better prompt or just not done it. But I think it's also fair to hold Pisco's feet to the fire on the sort of entailments of court expansion, right? Pisco, tactically speaking, wants to defend the minimal proposition of if it's at least justified to expand the court by one justice. He wants to have that sort of burden and then go from there. I think it's a nifty debate tactic, but I don't think it's interesting to anybody. Nobody cares about your sort of pedantic argument that it's maybe justified to expand the court by one seat. What people care about is the argument that we need to expand the court, pack it with political operatives, and have them interpret the Constitution the way that the current administration wants them to. Now, they would just say that's what happened with the Trump administration. We could fight about all that, whatever. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Love history. It was fascinating to learn that the Livingstons, one who signed the Declaration, one who was on the Committee of Five, are blood relatives of mine. Very nice. That's awesome. Thanks for stopping by. That's really cool. I don't think I have any. I've done a lot of genealogy stuff. I have some ancestors who were here pretty early, late 1600s. And so one of my direct paternal ancestors, Peter Bonn, married into the family who authored the 1688 Quaker petition against slavery. So that's cool, but I haven't been able to find any evidence that anybody I'm related to was actually sort of active in the revolution, which is kind of unfortunate to be like, oh, but you guys were there. Like, what were you doing the whole time? And maybe I don't want to know, but yeah, thanks for stopping by. That's really cool. So there's an editorial summary here of thoughts on government. As he says, this presents the essence of Adams' political system. Though it was dashed off quickly as a letter to a friend, it obviously was the result of years of study, reflection, and experience. And so this is something you could just sit down and read for yourself very quickly. We're not going to have time to read it all, but it is worthwhile to read as much of it as we can. So I'll read some out loud, and then I'll do some sort of exegesis of it as we go. All right, my dear sir, if I was equal to the task of forming a plan for the government of a colony, I should be flattered with your request and very happy to comply with it, because as the divine science of politics is the science of social happiness, and the blessings of society depend entirely on the constitutions of government, which are generally institutions that last for many generations, there can be no employment more agreeable to a benevolent mind than a research after the best. So he's going to take the line that the science of politics is the science of social happiness. To do politics means to deal with the matters of the things of the city, to live well together. And that is the science of human happiness, the science of social happiness. And the social happiness obtains, he says, generally when you have good institutions and constitutions. And so we need to know what sorts of institutions and constitutions best facilitate that social happiness. Now here he's going to object to a famous quote from Alexander Pope. He said, Pope flattered tyrants too much when he said, "For forms of government let fools contest. That which is best administered is best." And this is a line that was quoted quite often during this period. It's quoted by the anti-federalists against the authors of the Constitution. They agree often with Pope's claim here, which is, look, guys, does it really matter all that much what structure we have if we have the best people in charge? Right? This is a classic question of political theory I pose to my students. It sometimes gets phrased, would you rather live under the best laws or the best king? And it's an interesting question, because if you can conceive of an ideal king, the best possible political ruler in the, call it Aristotelian sense, somebody who's doing everything for the common good, many people do say, yeah, of course I'd want the best king, right? But what Adams and the authors of the Federalist, especially Madison, are going to say is that, yeah, it's nice in theory to have one really good political ruler. Yes, Smitty, best king, no doubt, right? It's nice in theory, right? And maybe you do have one good king. And maybe you're even optimistic that, for reasons we'll get into with Adams later, the best king will tend to have good children. And so the people who succeed him will be good. But if you don't have those good laws in place, what happens when you get the bad apple? Going to the Yes Kings protest later this summer. Oh, did anybody organize one of those? Because that would have been really funny, actually. Because I do know some people who actually call themselves monarchists. And you know, like it's kind of a LARP, but it would be really funny if you had guys just like going out and doing a Yes Kings, take us back, England protest, right? Across from the No Kings protest. Did I read the Brookings report on AI in education? I've not. Let me pull that up. Let me pull that up. I don't know if I have links enabled in the YouTube chat. Is this the January 2026 one? A new direction for students in an AI world. Prosper, prepare, protect. Is that it? Then I will definitely read that if that's the one. Revolt, get a new line, rinse, repeat as necessary. There you go. Right. So if that's the one, I like its conclusions. Excellent. I will pull that up. Maybe I'll do a stream on that later this week. So if Pope is correct, then we really don't need to spend all this time dickering over forms of government. But Adams says nothing can be more fallacious than this. But, he says, poets read history to collect flowers, not fruits. They attend to fanciful images, not the effects of social institutions. So he's saying Pope is nothing more here than a poet. It's romance to think that it's better to have a good man at the helm rather than good laws and good institutions. Nothing is more certain from the history of nations and nature of man than that some forms of government are better fitted for being well administered than others. And this, if I could summarize my way of thinking about politics in one sentence, that might be the best way to do it, right? I'm constantly trying to get my students to think in terms of incentive structures. You know, it's a little bit of like a public choice kind of thinking. Like, okay, we don't have to assume people are great. We don't have to assume they're horrible. Just what would you expect someone in this situation to do? With the levers of power that you've given them, with the institutions you've given them, the checks and balances, etc. Would you expect them to be corrupt and enrich themselves? Would you expect them to do this, that, right? We don't have to assume people are the worst ever. We don't have to assume they're the best ever. We just have to have some understanding of, in general, what is this institution going to incentivize? And so he's going to say, look, we just know from history, certain types of government, even if you occasionally have good rulers, are just gonna tend more towards tyranny than others. And if that's the case, then we ought to be looking for the one that is best fitted to being best administered. Let's find, if possible, the form of government that tends to drive us towards the better kinds of behavior rather than the worse ones. That's what we're aiming at. Okay, so we ought to consider what is the end of government before we determine which is the best form. Makes sense. What's the goal? What's the purpose of government? We really need to know what that's for before we can determine what's best, right? It would be like trying to select the best knife if you had no idea what knives were for, right? You've got to have idea of the function or the purpose or the goal, the telos here. Upon this point, all speculative politicians will agree that the happiness of society is the end of government, as all divines and moral philosophers will agree that the happiness of the individual is the end of man. Again, this is just straight Aristotelianism injected into my veins. From this principle, it will follow that the form of government which communicates ease, comfort, security, or in one word, happiness to the greatest number of persons and in the greatest degree is the best. Now, when he says ease, comfort, and security or happiness, right, he's not taking like a sort of simplistic hedonistic view here. He is really, he's steeped in the tradition. He knows sort of what Aristotle means by happiness, and it's not what we usually mean by happiness. It's a bit richer than that. He's onboarding that. It's the thicker kind of happiness here, not just sort of desire satisfaction. We will cover some Madison, especially when we get to the Federalist. Yeah, that's on the agenda. But mostly this class, I do a kind of back and forth between Jefferson and Adams in a lot of ways. It makes a useful teaching tool. Their relationship is very illuminating in many ways. So I don't spend as much time on Madison as some other people do. Maybe that's a fault of mine. I also just don't know Madison that well outside of constitutional ratification debates. He's a sort of a fuzzy spot with me, so I spend a lot more time with Adams than I do with Madison, which, if you're a good historian, you might say that's the wrong kind of emphasis, because Madison is in many ways, especially by the time we get to the Constitutional Convention, far more influential than Adams is. That might be a mistake on my part, but I don't care. I get to teach this class how I want, and I'm excited about it. Okay, all sober inquirers after the truth, ancient and modern, pagan and Christian, have declared that the happiness of man as well as his dignity consists in virtue. That is an excellence of character. Confucius, Zoroaster, Socrates, Muhammad, not to mention authorities really sacred, have agreed in this. I love his little quips like that. It's so fun. Because he's being a little snide. He's a little bit irreverent. He's doing sort of what Machiavelli does, where Machiavelli's like, think of all the great founders in history, like Lycurgus and Theseus and Moses. Moses is a great founder. Now, he says, well, we can't reason about Moses because he was an instrument of God. He was God's mouthpiece on earth. We can't reason about Moses. But if we did reason about Moses, he's not all that different from the other ones. Okay, anyways, right? So Adams is doing a little bit of that, right? He's like, look, we have these great philosophers in history. Oh yeah, and then the sacred texts too also say this. If there is a form of government, then, whose principle and foundation is virtue, will not every sober man acknowledge it better calculated to promote the general happiness than any other form? You should allow for super chats. I will when I can. So I'm not monetized yet. I need a lot more subscribers, and I need a lot more watch hours. So it's my understanding when I go look at my earn page that I need at least 300 subscribers and 3,000 watch hours over the course of a year to qualify for super chats to start coming through, and then I can't get monetized for ads without like 1,000 subscribers and something else after that. So if you want me to be able to accept super chats, then you should share this with your friends, tell them to subscribe, get me up to 300 subscribers, and watch all my videos a dozen times a day so I can get all my watch hours in, and you will be my favorite people in the world. I appreciate you. I am hoping at some point to edit certain sections of this into video segments so that I could I don't care about the ads. I would like to do the super chats at some point, but getting ads is not, I don't care. But tell your friends, tell them to subscribe. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can start sending me money. You don't have to send me money. I never care about the money. This is pure productivity for me. It'll just be fun if I can. So I need more watch hours and I need a lot more subscribers. So help me out. If there is a form of government, then will not every sober man acknowledge it to be better calculated to promote the general happiness than any other form? Fear is the foundation of most governments. But it's so sordid and brutal a passion, and renders men in whose breasts it predominates so stupid and miserable that Americans will not be likely to approve of any political institution which is founded on it. So this is the foundation of most governments in history is just fear. It's strongmen. It's just might makes right. That's most governments, he says. That's the foundation, and he says the Americans will not tolerate that, so that's out. Honor, he says, that's truly sacred, but it holds a lower rank on the scale of moral excellence than virtue. So if there is such a thing as a sort of Homeric politics, or the politics that obtains in like pre-Socratic Greece, this would be an honor-based system. And he says the former is but a part of the latter and consequently has not equal pretensions to support a frame of government productive of human happiness. He says when we subject happiness to honor, we're getting things out of whack. Honor is part of a full, flourishing human life, but it's not the most important thing. It ought not be the what we might call the fundamental care. At least that's what Adams is suggesting here. He says the foundation of every government is some principle or passion in the minds of the people. We're so very different from those people who are afraid of the government. We are very different, Ian. Ian, I sometimes get the feeling that you're not buying into some of the things that these founders are saying, and I just want you to know I'm keeping an eye on you and keeping a log, and I'm going to report you to your government, okay? The noblest principles and most generous affections in our nature, then, have the fairest chance to support the noblest and most generous models of government. A man must be indifferent to the sneers of modern Englishmen to mention in their company the names of Sidney, Harrington, Locke, Milton, Needham, Neville, Burnet, and Hoadley. No small fortitude is necessary to confess that one has read them. So, by the way, even at this time in the American founding period, there are people complaining that people are stuffy and ignorant. Right? It's unpopular to admit that you've read these great English writers. The wretched condition of this country, however, for 10 or 15 years past, has frequently reminded me of their principles and reasonings. They will convince any candid mind that there is no good government but what is republican. And when you see that word republican, again, you should think of this as the Aristotelian politeia, kind of. A republican government, in the way that Adams is going to describe it, is one in which the people are represented in the legislature by people that they elect, that has limits on the power of government. So it's not a small government necessarily, but it's a limited government. And so it's representative, limited government with a constitution that keeps it accountable. That's the kind of sum of this here. The only valuable part of the British Constitution is so because the very definition of a republic is an empire of laws and not of men. That as a republic is the best of governments, so that particular arrangement of the powers of society, or in other words, that form of government which is best contrived to secure an impartial and exact execution of laws, is the best of republics. Sometimes I wonder if I'd have been a Tory. I mean, it was a very popular position. It was the majority position for most people, or at least the active revolutionaries were in the minority. It seems, actually, yeah, the last I remember hearing a good historian talk about this, they suggested it was about one third. About one third of people were kind of indifferent or just riding the wave. About one third were actively involved in the revolutionary cause, and about one third were supportive of the English. But those might be wrong numbers. Again, I'm not a historian, so that might be a little bit out of whack. But it's some very smart people were Tories. And some people that we think of as the quintessential American founders were almost Tories. Franklin was like, if a couple of things had gone differently, Franklin would have been a Tory. It's weird coincidences of history that we forget about sometimes, I think. Okay, one second. Okay. Of republics, there is an inexhaustible variety because the possible combinations of the powers of society are capable of innumerable variations. And this is important, right? For people like Adams, the form of government that we ended up with is not the only one that's legitimate. It's not the only one that aims at happiness. It's not the only one that's free. It's not the only one that's a republic. The American republic could serve as a model, maybe, for other republics, but it's not the only kind of republic. And that's really important to keep in mind as we consider the sort of flexibility a constitution ought to have. When should it change? How hard should it be to change? Those questions are prudential and practical in many cases. We don't have to treat this particular arrangement as the sort of like, divine institution. It could be changed. As good government is an empire of laws, how shall the laws be made? In a large society inhabiting an extensive country, it is impossible that the whole should assemble to make laws, so we can't have direct democracy. The first necessary step then, is to depute power from the many to a few of the most wise and good. But by what rules shall you choose your representatives? Agree upon the number and qualifications of persons who shall have the benefit of choosing, or annex this privilege to the inhabitants of a certain extent of ground. The principal difficulty lies, and the greatest care should be employed in constituting this representative assembly. It should be, in miniature, an exact portrait of the people at large. This is super important for Adams. When you look at whatever body is making your laws, it should look like the people. Now, obviously, Adams is not saying it needs to be exactly mathematically proportional. But it should, in general, he says, think, feel, reason, and act like them. That it may be the interest of this assembly to do strict justice at all times, it should be an equal representation, or, in other words, equal interests among the people should have equal interests in it. So the grand variety of possible interests you could have, say the one that's mentioned early on in the Federalist is the grand division of interest between those who have land and those who do not. Those who rent and those who own, those who are freeholders and those who aren't. Those are great divisions of interests. Both, I think Adams is saying, ought to have some sort of representation here, which is a kind of radical proposition for some people. Great care should be taken to effect this and to prevent unfair, partial, and corrupt elections. Such regulations, however, may be better made in times of great tranquility than the present, and they will spring up themselves naturally when all the powers of government come to be in the hands of the people's friends. At present, it will be safest to proceed in all established modes to which the people have been familiarized by habit. So basically, whatever rules you're already using for elections, whatever property requirements, whatever, you got to live in this place, etc., keep them the same for now, and then over time we'll be able to improve upon those, right? This is another thing that's capable of being changed. A representation of the people in one assembly being obtained, a question arises whether all the powers of government, legislative, executive, and judicial, shall be left in this body. I think a people cannot be long free nor ever happy whose government is in one assembly. My reasons for this are as follow. 1. A single assembly is liable to all the vices, follies, and frailties of an individual, subject to fits of humor, starts of passion, flights of enthusiasm, partialities, or prejudice, and consequently productive of hasty results and absurd judgments. And all these errors ought to be corrected and defects supplied by some controlling power. So Adams is dealing with this argument, right, about complex government. Should we have multiple parts in the legislature, or would it not be easier to just have one body do it all? Right? This whole House and Senate business we got going on today is really inconvenient. The works get gummed up. There's this thing called gridlock. There's this thing called polarization. And we sometimes question whether it might not be better to have a more streamlined system. Well, Adams is saying a streamlined system, in the way that we might think of it, is one that is, as he says, liable to all the vices, follies, and frailties of the individual. You just make it as fickle as any one person. And that's scary. That's really scary. If one body has the power to make laws with punishments up to and including death, which is what Locke says is the political power, then what's to stop them if they, are a little bit grumpy from exercising tyranny? He says there must be some other controlling power. He says a single assembly is apt to be avaricious and in time will not scruple to exempt itself from burdens which it lay without compunction, on its constituents. So if you don't have some external check on this body, they'll make laws that will affect those guys, but not me. I don't have to live under that law. Come on. A single assembly is apt to grow ambitious and after a time will not hesitate to vote itself perpetual. This was one fault of the long parliament, but more remarkably of Holland, whose assembly first voted themselves from annual to septennial, then for life, and after a course of years that all vacancies happening by death or otherwise should be filled by themselves, without any application to constituents at all. Right? So if they're the ones making the laws, they could just pass a law that gives them perpetual office. We need a system where the politicians sit down, discuss the problem, agree what's in the best interest of all the people, and then do it. I love this idea. I truly do. This is amazing. I don't know why we haven't. Why has no one tried this? Why has no one tried this? Here, I'm going to mute my desktop audio for a second. Okay, Okay, Ryan's still talking about court packing. Pisco was in his chat earlier. That'd be fun. What a fun group they've got over there. Okay. I think I'm gonna. Let me see. I'm going to start my virtual camera. I'm going to actually go ahead and hop backstage for... Okay, sorry. Mute myself over here. Oh no. Okay. All right, I'm in the waiting. Okay. Yeah, if Ryan pulls me up, I want to kick him, push him a little bit to get into some of this Benjamin Rush stuff. So let me pull that up as well. I'll have this available for when we chat, if we chat. Have that out over here. Okay, sorry. I've stalled myself. We'll go back. We got this. Okay, there we go. All right. So they can vote themselves perpetual. A representative assembly, although extremely well qualified and absolutely necessary as a branch of the legislature, is unfit to exercise the executive power for want of two essential properties, secrecy and dispatch. So this is something that comes up in the Federalist Papers. It comes up quite a lot in the founding era, this concern over which part of government is going to have these capacities of secrecy and dispatch, basically making plans that are not immediately available to the public eye and of issuing orders that have force. And that is naturally bound to the executive. But this single representative assembly, he says, won't have secrecy, right? Theoretically, if it's accountable to the people, everything will be out in the public. And so splitting the government up into parts helps with this issue of secrecy and dispatch. A representative assembly is still less qualified for the judicial power because it's too numerous, too slow, and too little skilled with the laws. Because a single assembly possessed of all the powers of government would make arbitrary laws for their own interest, execute all laws arbitrarily for their own interest, and adjudge all controversies in their own favor. But shall the whole power of legislation rest in one assembly? Right. So the foregoing arguments, he says, apply mostly to the issue of government as a whole. It's an argument that we should have multiple branches of government. But then the question is, shouldn't we also split up the legislative body into multiple houses? So he says, most of the foregoing reasons apply equally to prove that the legislative power ought to be more complex, to which we may add that if the legislative power is wholly in one assembly and the executive in another or in a single person, these two powers will oppose and encroach upon each other until the contest shall end in war, and the whole power, legislative and executive, be usurped by the strongest. The judicial power in such case could not mediate or hold the balance between the two contending powers because the legislative would undermine it. And this shows the necessity, too, of giving the executive power a negative upon the legislative. Otherwise, this will be continually encroaching upon that. To avoid these dangers, let a distinct assembly be constituted as a mediator between the two extreme branches of the legislature, that which represents the people and that which is vested with the executive power. So this is effectively the same reasoning that is employed in Plutarch's Life of Lycurgus. When Lycurgus comes back to Sparta after touring the world and studying different systems of government and presents the Spartan people with his reform propositions for their system of government, what he says is we need a ballast for the ship of state to keep it stable through the storm. And this ballast is going to be the Spartan Senate. And that's exactly what Adams is proposing here. He's completely on board with this idea that the Senate is going to be a balancing power. Hold on a second. Sorry. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So the Senate, he's going to suggest, is going to be a balancing power between the two extremes. And again, this is the same language that's used in Plutarch. Lycurgus saw that in the Spartan system of government, there were two extremes. You have the mass of the people who sometimes get grumpy and take up arms and revolt. And then you have the king. And he just does what he wants, or on an ordinary day until the people rise up and kill him. And so he says there's this back and forth whiplash between democratic revolt, absolute tyranny, democratic revolt, absolute tyranny. For Lycurgus, for Adams, the Senate is the thing that could sort of mediate between those two things. So to avoid these dangers, let the representative assembly then elect by ballot from among themselves or their constituents or both a distinct assembly, which for the sake of perspicuity, we will call a council. It may consist of any number you please, say 20 or 30, and should have a free and independent exercise of its judgment and consequently a negative voice in the legislature. So interestingly, he suggests that this body needs to be staffed by the people who are already elected to office. So this is not too dissimilar from the way that we did senatorial election under the original Constitution, but he's talking about in a state, right? He says your state, you should have a House where the people, anybody who's allowed to vote, votes for your representative in the House, and then that House gets together to vote on either eminent people from the community or members from among themselves to be part of this smaller council. These two bodies, thus constituted and made integral parts of the legislature, let them unite and by joint ballot choose a governor, who, after being stripped of most of those badges of domination called prerogatives, should have a free and independent exercise of his judgment and be made also an integral part of the legislature. So interestingly, Adams, as well as others, conceive of the executive power as part of the legislative power. This is really important for them in ways that I'll unpack more in future streams, but it's a big deal for them that this is, it's not, there's not a complete separation of powers. That's the point. Okay. This, I know, is liable to objections, and if you please, you may make him only president of the council, as in Connecticut. But as the governor is to be invested with the executive power with the consent of the council, I think he ought to have a negative upon the legislative, so he supports an executive veto. If he is annually elective, as he ought to be, he will always have so much reverence and affection for the people, their representatives and councilors, that, although you give him an independent exercise of his judgment, he will seldom use it in opposition to the two houses, except in some cases, the public utility of which would be conspicuous, and some such cases would happen. In the present exigency of American affairs, when, by an act of Parliament, we are put out of the royal protection and consequently discharged from our allegiance, and it has become necessary to assume government for our immediate security, the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary, treasurer, commissary, attorney general should be chosen by joint ballot of both houses. And these and all other elections, especially of representatives and councilors, should be annual. There not being in the whole circle of the sciences a maxim more infallible than this, where annual elections end, slavery begins. These great men in this respect should be once a year, like bubbles on the sea of matter born. They rise, they break, and to that sea return. I love it. He just randomly starts quoting poetry. So this also is something that seems very foreign to us in many ways. Adams is suggesting that it is absolutely essential that all people who have legislative power and executive power, the people who make the laws that punish people and the people who get to enforce those laws, all of those people should be elected annually. You shouldn't let them have 4, 5-year, 6-year terms. They need to be taught, he says, the great political virtues of humility, patience, and moderation, without which every man in power becomes a ravenous beast of prey. This mode of constituting the great offices, This mode of constituting the great offices of state will answer very well for present, but if by experiment it should be found inconvenient, the legislature may at its leisure devise other methods of creating them, by elections of the people at large, as in Connecticut, or it may enlarge the term for which they shall be chosen to 7 years or 3 years or life, or make any other alterations which the society shall find productive of its ease, its safety, its freedom, or in one word, its happiness. So again, you can see here, I think this is, I really like this section. I like to zoom in on it with students a lot, because Adams clearly has a preference. He likes annual elections. He doesn't think we should move away from that, but he says it's perfectly within the purview of the state to alter that. They can change the mode of election. They can change the term of office. Totally fine. That's all within the boundaries of affecting safety, freedom, and happiness. There's another section that I want to look at really quickly. This one's, I like this. Laws for the liberal education of the youth, especially for lower classes of the people, are so extremely wise and useful that to a humane and generous mind, no expense for this purpose would be thought extravagant. If you run into anybody who suggests that public provision of education is some sort of commie conspiracy or something, just start quoting John Adams at them. Okay, I'm not, I was homeschooled. I have my criticisms of the public education system. I think there are lots of flaws with it, but there are people in that movement, people who are very into homeschooling, very strong advocates for it, who, I forgot to turn my desktop audio on. You guys need some music in the background so I can be less annoying. Maybe it's more annoying, I don't know. Who suggest that the public provision of education through taxation is itself some sort of injustice. Adams says his intuition is the exact opposite, that no expense should be spared for the liberal education of these youths of America. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. The Utes. Okay. Bonus points if you can catch the reference. I need to rewatch that movie soon. So we should provide for education. Sumptuary laws. Sumptuary laws are something we could do a whole day on, especially if I'm only doing these in these little hour-long chunks. But sumptuary laws, Adams supported, others like him supported. These are laws that restrict or heavily tax visible signs of wealth. So it would either make illegal or make financially punitive the purchase of luxury goods of certain types and amounts. The idea is to encourage frugality, thrift, and especially discourage ostentatious displays of wealth. So that's it's a whole thing. He says, frugality is a great revenue, besides curing us of vanities, levities, and fopperies, which are real antidotes to all great manly and warlike virtues. Find it very interesting. Hume has an essay on commerce that grapples with these sumptuary laws, and he takes exactly the opposite stance. Okay. Yeah, so thoughts on government, very good, very useful. Let's look through the Constitution of Massachusetts really quickly. So this is his proposal from 1779 to 1780 when he served in the Constitutional Convention. I'm sorry, I'm just dead air here. All right, so let's. Here's the preamble of the Massachusetts Constitution that he was the primary drafter of. There, the preface is talking about some of the edits that were made, and I was trying to remember what some of those prominent edits were. Okay, so the end of the institution, maintenance, and administration of government is to secure the existence of the body politic, to protect it, and to furnish the individuals who compose it with the power of enjoying in safety and tranquility their natural rights and the blessings of life. And whenever these great objects are not obtained, the people have a right to alter the government and to take measures necessary for their safety, happiness, and prosperity. The body politic is formed by voluntary association of individuals. It is a social compact by which the whole people covenants with each citizen and each citizen with the whole people that all shall be governed by certain laws for the common good. It is the duty of the people, therefore, in framing the constitution of government to provide for an equitable mode of making laws, as well as for an impartial interpretation and a faithful execution of them, that every man may at all times find his security in them. We, therefore, the delegates of the people of Massachusetts, I think the brackets are the additions by the committee outside of Adams' text, so he just had we, the people of Massachusetts, in general convention assembled for the express and sole purpose of framing a constitution or form of government to be laid before our constituents according to their instructions, acknowledging with grateful hearts the goodness of the great legislator of the universe in affording to this people, in the course of his providence, an opportunity of entering into an original, explicit, and solemn compact with each other, deliberately and peaceably, without fraud, violence, or surprise, and of forming a new constitution of civil government for themselves and their posterity, and devoutly imploring his direction in a design so interesting to them and their posterity, do, by virtue of the authority vested in us by our constituents, agree upon the following Declaration of Rights and frame of government as the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Ooh, 1 second. All right, Declaration of Rights. This, by the way, remember, the Benjamin Rush letters that we looked at last time, the thing that he thought was missing from the Pennsylvania Constitution was a Bill of Rights. The Pennsylvania Constitution, at least on paper, leaves open the possibility the government could pass whatever laws they want. This Bill of Rights is supposed to restrict the authority of that government to certain defined objects and to specifically, carve out areas that are beyond the reach of the legislative power. So that's an important feature here. Let's see. All men are born equally free and independent and have certain natural, essential, and unalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting their property, in fine, that of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. It is the duty of all men in society, publicly and at stated seasons, to worship the Supreme Being, the great Creator and Preserver of the universe. And no subject shall be hurt, molested, or restrained in his person, liberty, or estate for worshiping God in the manner most agreeable to the dictates of his own conscience, or for his religious profession or sentiments, provided he does not disturb the public peace or obstruct others in their religious worship. So, a right to freedom of religion, premised on, it's important to say, the obligation that all men have to worship God. Right, so this is an important feature that they wanted in there, in some sense. It certainly is not giving you, I don't think it's giving you exactly what Christian nationalists today would want, right? The idea of simply mentioning a supreme being, creator and preserver of the universe. This is very general language, very intentionally so, because Massachusetts has a great variety of religions, is how Adams would describe it, right? We would call them maybe denominations in certain senses, but some of these people are not even Christian at all, like some of the Unitarians and even atheists. But certainly Unitarians who deny the Trinity, certainly various heretical offshoots of Christianity, etc. And I mean, if you're a Catholic or an Orthodox, you think all of these are heretics or schismatics or heterodox or whatever the precise term would be, given the nature of their disputes. This is intended to include them. Adams is a defender of religious liberty across his life, and so that's an important feature here. The people of this Commonwealth have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and do and forever hereafter shall exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right which are not or may not hereafter be by them expressly delegated to the United States of America in Congress assembled. All power residing originally in the people and being derived from them. The several magistrates and officers of government vested with authority, whether legislative, executive, or judicial, are their substitutes and agents and are at all times accountable to them. Yes, well, we all know that you're a dirty, dirty heretic, Origin, but we keep you around anyways because you make conversation interesting, at the very least. So, Gaelic, yes, my favorite language. Scottish Gaelic, yes. Hold on a second. Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. Okay, I'm just was just checking on what was happening over in the Ryan stream. Okay. No man nor corporation or association of men have any other title to obtain advantages or particular and exclusive privileges distinct from those of the community than what arises from the consideration of services rendered to the public. And this title being in nature neither hereditary nor transmissible to children or descendants or relations by blood, the idea of a man born a magistrate, lawgiver, or judge is absurd and unnatural. So we don't have hierarchy by birth in the Massachusetts state. Government is instituted for the common good, for the protection, safety, prosperity, and happiness of the people, and not for the profit, honor, or private interest of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, the people alone have an incontestable, unalienable, and indefeasible right to institute government and to reform, alter, or totally change the same when their protection, safety, prosperity, and happiness require it. In order to prevent those who are vested with authority from becoming oppressors, the people have a right at such periods and in such manner as may be delineated in their frame of government to cause their public officers to return to private life and to fill up vacant places by certain and regular elections. All elections ought to be free, and all the male inhabitants of this Commonwealth, having sufficient qualifications, have an equal right to elect officers and to be elected for public employments. Each individual of the society has a right to be protected protected by it, in the enjoyment of his life, liberty, and property according to the laws. Judicial department separate from the legislative power. Frame of government. So you have a legislative branch with the Senate and House of Representatives. That makes this different from the Pennsylvania Constitution already. They shall assemble once on the last Wednesday in May, and at such other times as they shall judge necessary every year, shall be styled the General Court of Massachusetts. The Senate shall be annually elected by the freeholders and other inhabitants of this Commonwealth, qualified as in this Constitution is provided 40 persons to be councilors and senators for the year ensuing their election, to be chosen in and by the inhabitants of the districts into which the Commonwealth may from time to time be divided by the General Court for that purpose. The Senate shall be the first branch of the legislature. It's an interesting difference between his Constitution and our United States Constitution, is that the first branch is all of Congress. The House is treated first, the people's house. Right? There shall be in the legislature of this Commonwealth a representation of the people, annually elected and founded in equality. Right. So up here you have councilors and senators. Like the very language of senator is giving the sort of weight of the Roman Senate, the Lycurgan Spartan Senate, the elderly men who made it up and provided their service as sort of mentors and counselors for the rest of the body, a mediating, moderating force. Chosen annually. All money bills shall originate there. It's an important thing that carries over to our Constitution. Executive power. The governor, interestingly enough, this is a fun feature of the Massachusetts Constitution. The governor shall be chosen annually. And in order to be elected, he shall have been an inhabitant of this Commonwealth for 7 years, next proceeding, unless he shall at the same time be seized in his own right of a freehold within the Commonwealth of the value of £1,000, and unless he shall be of the Christian religion. He has to be a Christian of some sort. The type of Christian is not important, particularly, but it does have to be a Christian, professing Christian. Okay, judiciary power. This is my favorite section, the encouragement of literature. Wisdom and knowledge as well as virtue diffused generally among the body of the people, being necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties. And as these depend on spreading the opportunities and advantages of education in various parts of the country and among the different orders of the people, it shall be the duty of the legislators and magistrates in all future periods of this Commonwealth to cherish the interests of literature and sciences and all seminaries of them, especially the University at Cambridge, that is Harvard University, public schools and grammar schools in the towns, to encourage private societies and public institutions, rewards and immunities for the promotion of agriculture, arts, sciences, commerce, trades, manufactures, and a natural history of the country. To countenance and inculcate the principles of humanity and general benevolence, public and private charity, industry and frugality, honesty and punctuality in their dealings, sincerity, good humor, and all social affections and generous sentiments among the people. And so this note here says it's peculiar and in one sense original to Mr. Adams. This is a development that he makes to the Constitution. Okay, I'm going to call it here because I have found that my I did my first couple streams for 2 hours, and that's a fine amount of time, but I've found an hour I get through a good amount of what I want to do, and then I still have some time to do some other things that I want to do, such as, if Ian is still here, playing Path of Exile. So I'm going to call it here, and next stream, whenever that is, we will get on to the defense of the constitutions of the government of the United States of America. That is a defense of the state constitutions against their critics, especially in France, who think these constitutions are chaotic, disorganized, inefficient, and so on. Always making it near the end of stream. Yeah, good to see you, man. Yep, we made it through a little Adam's thoughts on government, or most of it, and then the some sections from the Massachusetts Constitution that he penned. Next time, the defense of the constitutions of the United States of America will be fun. I think you'll enjoy that one. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to do that, though, so I will have to get back to you, but keep an eye out. If you're not subscribed, please do subscribe, and then you'll get notifications when I go live, especially if you hit that weird little bell thing. It's annoying that you have to do that at all, but appreciate you guys stopping by. It was good chatting with some of y'all, and I hope to see you again soon. This has been useful and productive for me, as always, and I hope you all have an excellent night. Have a good evening. Demosthenes, that would be fun. Yeah. I mean, I can just go. I plan eventually to do these sort of productivity streams going through all sorts of examples from the history of political thought. It's really nice to be able to double up some of my work, and some of this, especially if people find it interesting. So, yeah, happy to do that. So, all right. Well, thank you for stopping by. Good to see you again. Good to see Ian, Origin, and everyone else.